Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to share with you my Scareclaw deck profile. Now this particular deck is very fun because it's so straightforward and you have the ability to just turn your brain and essentially just play this deck. Now I would say this, however, that this deck is also just really budget for the most part for anybody who want to pick it up. Now of course there are some particular cards in my extra deck and some particular card choices that you can change for budget options, but for the most part this is a very easy core to get your hands on and, like I said, pretty budget. But before we jump right into the deck list itself, I'm going to remind you that if you want to see more videos like this and help support the channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It helps a ton. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think about this list? What will you have changed? Essentially also giving me tips for the future. And of course, give a like to the video if you enjoyed. But without further ado, let's jump right into the list itself. Alright, so jumping into the deck list itself, we're going to start things off, of course, with our Scareclaw monsters. And for our Scareclaw monsters, we'll run 3 copies of course, Reinhardt, which is the main monster of the deck. 3 copies of Acro, 3 copies of Balone, and then of course 3 copies of Astra. These are the 12 names for Scareclaws that you want to run in your deck. I do recommend maximizing on these guys because of the fact that we are kind of in the need to have these because of the new Link 1. So it is pretty much necessary to have these just in order to start your combos. But what is the gimmick of the Scareclaw monsters? Well, the Scareclaw monsters have this particular gimmick by themselves, of course, that they like monsters in defense position, and they also like to boost or support their extra monster zone Scareclaw Link monster. So basically, that's kind of like their main gimmick. So they also like to turn the opponent monsters in defense position if possible, and essentially get benefit from that. But on top of that, all of these monsters are also free special summons from your hand. If you control a Scareclaw monster, you can special summon a Scareclaw monster, this, or should I say these, out of your hand into an adjacent or in the same column of it if you have a Scareclaw monster in the extra monster zone, from your deck to your hand, from your hand to your side of the field, as a harder once per turn, of course. And even if you control the same name, you are able to special summon it out of your hand, because let's say you have 2 Astras, it doesn't say that you cannot special summon this out of your hand. Basically, you can only special summon this once per turn this way, but it doesn't mention in the card that if you have 2 Astras, for example, you can have normal summon the first one and then you can special summon the other one if you want to. But as for their own individual effects, let's start off with the small ones because the small ones are the easier ones to explain. They basically grant your extra deck Scareclaw monster an effect. In the case of Acro, this basically is giving your Scareclaw monster in the extra monster zone 300 attack for each defense position monster you control. Yes, it has to be you control. Some effects have with, monsters your opponent control as well in defense position, but this one's only monsters you control. In the case of Balone, it's your granting your extra deck Scareclaw monster piercing damage. In the case of Astra, it's granted the ability to attack up to the number of defense position monsters you control, so that is also very, very powerful. So these are like, your small guys that grant the extra monster zone, Scareclaw monster, an additional effect. But in the case of Reinhardt, he is your searcher for your Scareclaw spells and traps. And on top of that, if you control 3, or should I say, if there are 3 defense position monsters on the field, including himself, he also drawing for you a card, so it becomes basically a +2 just by 1 card. But you have to control enough defense position monsters in order to get this particular effect. Regardless, it's not super hard, but it is something that should be mentioned about this particular card. But yeah, that does it for the Scareclaw monsters themselves. They're basically very, very important, and you kind of just have to maximize on them, in my opinion, right now, just in order to have the ability to get to the Link 1 with a greater of ease. Then, for the last, I guess, related monster, we have 1 copy of Via Starfrost. This is basically your tuner that you can just tribute monster, or should I say destroy a monster with a different type of attribute than it, so basically or any other of your smaller Scareclaw monsters. Not Reinhardt, because Reinhardt is a warrior just like this, but any of those, and then you special summon this out of your hand, and it's just a great tuner to just maybe go with the Reinhardt into a Baron or another extender. It's just giving you some particular options, so that I do like to run this card, and it is searchable now because we do have ways to get into the field spell easier. So again, you just need to run 1 copy of it. Also, just to mention, it is a card that I'm considering to running in Dinos because it does trigger your babies, so that's also pretty awesome. And then, for the last monster that I do run, I run 3 copies of Parallel Exceed. This particular card is great. Basically, trigger really easily when you summon the Tryhard or any monster of the nature that, like, you know, have link arrows down. Unfortunately, it doesn't trigger with your new link 1 because the link 1 have an arrow to the left. But beside that, this is still a really great card, because special summon another copy of it directly from your deck, and essentially giving you either more link materials or rank 4, which is very powerful, and also just very helpful. Now granted, I am running this instead of the Rescue Cat, because Rescue Cat, in my opinion, is very bad in this deck right now, because, how should I say this? This deck already struggled with the fact that, like, you needed, how should I say this, like, you know, ways to summon monsters. Like, before we had the Link 1, the Rescue Cat made sense and the risk makes sense because you needed to get enough monsters on the field to actually start plays. But in this particular case right now, that now we have the Link 1 and the things that we can do, Rescue Cat doesn't really make any sense because Rescue Cat just does get hit by Ash and Effect Veiler and Imperms, and if your opponent just stop you from using the Rescue Cat effect, and you don't have any other extension, which you shouldn't have because your Scareclaws, depending on your Scareclaws, your turn basically ends. So that's why I decided to go with Pearl Elixir, which is a little bit more practical. But that does it for the monsters themselves that you actually use. For the additional hand traps that are also monsters that you can just use, but mostly just hand traps, we have 3 copies of Ash and 3 copies of DD Crow. I decided to go with these ones because I just really like them. Ash is also great with your Hacky Firebreaks. If you need to summon a tuner, then just go into your Boral Sword plays, or if you play it, Access Code plays, but basically I only have the access for Boral Sword, so I'm going to say Boral Sword plays. And then you have DD Crow because we do want to deal with graveyard effects, because graveyard effects are really prevalent in this meta. Of course, you can change your hand traps depending on what you want, but this is what have been working for me. But that does it for the monsters, including the hand traps. Now for the spells. For the spells, we're starting things off with the 3 copies of the field spell and the 1 copy of Terraforming. In the future, I might cut this card to 2, because we will have additional good cards that we actually want to play, and it might actually be cloggy because it is a hard once per turn to activate, like just like Magical Meltdown. But right now, it's actually very important because you do want to get the search out of this card to actually do your plays. You're not super depending on it, but it is very important to actually want to try to resolve this. But it also have an additional 2 really good effects, which is the first effect is that you're able to, or should I say, this field spell reduce the attack and defense of your opponent monsters up by 100 for each defense position monster on the field. Yes, does include the opponent monsters as well. And if there are 3 or more defense position monsters on the field, just like Reinhardt, this card specifically allowing you to destroy a card your opponent control, which is just an additional advantage that you can just take a use of. So that is also very good. And then for our additional Scareclaw spells, which are actually searchable by Reinhardt, we have 2 copies of Arrival, and then the 1 copy of the card that I forgot its name, that unfortunately I don't have, that we also got in Power of the Elements. Basically, these 2 particular cards are really good. This particular card is basically a mini Honest / an Eagle booster, because it's allowing you to target an opponent monster, and then 1 Scareclaw monster. I believe it has to be Scareclaws that you control, and essentially, I think it's reduced the monster that you target's attack by half, and then your monster getting that additional boost to itself. And then on top of that, it's also a mini Eagle booster, because if your opponent target a Scareclaw monster you control, you're able to negate the effect, which is really good as well. Also, it's a quick play spell, so that's also a very nice advantage of this card. But the card that you actually care about more than this, even though this card is great, is Arrival, because it's not a hard once per turn monster reborn, and essentially a very good card for you to just have the 1 card combo into the Tryhard, which is kind of like the main thing that this deck goes for, which is very cool. On top of that, it also protects your Scareclaw Link monsters in the extra monster zone if they will be destroyed by battle, by card effect, by banish it, as a hard once per turn effect from the graveyard. And I do consider putting this card up to 3, because like I said, it's not once per turn, a harder once per turn monster reborn, but unfortunately it can only special summon the monsters in defense position, Scareclaw monsters, or via Star's Frost, so it does mean that you are not going to get the Link monsters. So there are advantages and disadvantages for this card, but I do think it's absolutely excellent, and at least you want to run it at 2. I see some builds run it at 1, but I think 2 is the correct number. As for the rest of your spells, we do have some consistency spells as well as just some useful utility cards. 2 copies of Pot of Desires, because we do run enough names in the deck that we can allow ourselves to run this. Also, another ways to see your actual Scareclaw monsters, because sometimes you don't have enough names or even a name in your hand to begin with, so that is actually pretty important. Speaking of additional name, we have the 13th name of a Scareclaw monster without desires. That is another copy of Reinhardt, which is reinforced with the army. One called by the grave to stop our opponent from stopping us from doing, stopping us from doing anything. And then the 3 copies of Dark Cooler No More, which should be droplets if you have them. My droplets are on the way, but I decided to go with this anyway for the time being. Because, a board breaking card is important and essentially just very, very good. A Dark Cooler in general is not a bad card. It just does mean that you will not be able to OTK. And I rather have the potential ability to OTK because I already don't really going to use a whole lot of cards out of my hand to just build the Link 3 and also just like give it the effects. So I rather have droplets instead, but like I said, Dark Cooler is not a bad alternative if you just want to break your opponent board and then build your own. It's not the worst, but like I said, you'll not be able to OTK with it. And that does it for that. And then for the traps, we have, of course, 4 of them. We start off with the Scareclaw trap, which is Scareclaw Clash. The most important effect of this card is the fact that if you control a Scareclaw monster in the extra monster zone and your opponent activate, or should I say Scareclaw Link monster, I guess, in the extra monster zone. Actually, it's just Scareclaw monster in the extra monster zone, but you don't really have anything else but Link. Basically, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you're able to negate that effect, or should I say a card effect, sorry, not a monster effect. You're basically able to negate that effect, and essentially by sending this card to the graveyard. So you have kind of like a weird interruption card that is also a continuous spell that have an additional effect. But mostly, like I said, you care about the negation effect, which can protect your boss monster, or just in general, just negate the opponent effect, which is really good. And then for the last trap and the last card in the deck, for rising up to 40, we have 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, because it's my favorite hand trap, and also just a great hand trap in general. But that's pretty much does it for the main deck. Now we'll move on into the extra deck. For the extra deck, we have first off 2 copies of Lightheart and then 2 copies of Tryhard for your Scareclaw links. I did see people running 3 and 3 of these, although I do sometimes agree with that build. I just like to have the options, that's why I run only 2 and 2, and I'm able to close up games really, really quickly, so that's why I also just think you only need 2 and 2. In the case of Lightheart, it's your searcher for your field spell if it's summoned in the extra monster zone, and you can only use monsters in the main monster zone to summon it. So you can use one Scareclaw or via Starfrost, but it has to be in the main monster zone to summon it. It does also have the ability to use itself to summon itself technically, but as long as it's in the main monster zone. So that's also pretty cool, and it also just doesn't really limit you to search the field spell more than one time per turn. So that's also really cool. Yeah, you're mostly just going to summon it once per turn, and that's it. The other effect that you care about is the once per duel effect, is that if you have this in the graveyard and you control via Starfrost, you are able to special summon this out of your graveyard. So most of the time, like let's say you search the field spell, you activate the field spell, you search the via Starfrost, it's tribute on this because it's a different type and attribute, you then summon the via Starfrost, and this special summon itself out of the graveyard, and then you got yourself a Link 2, or something of that nature, which is pretty good. And then we have Tryhard, which is your main boss monster. This is the card that you're trying to get into. This have 3000 attack, and also the effect to turn any monster on the field into defense position, which is really, really stupid. So that is very, very powerful. It's kind of like a Baguska effect, but without the negation effect. But on top of that, any monster in defense position cannot affect this card, so that is also really good. And you can also target a Scareclaw monster level 3 or lower while discarding the extra monster zone, special summon it, and also on top of that, add from your deck to your hand another Scareclaw monster on top of it, which is really cool. But you can only special summon a Scareclaw monster for the rest of the turn. So that is also just a particular thing about this card. On top of that, this requires 3 effect monsters, so it is a little bit harder to summon. But this card is absolutely excellent, and it's just a great floodgate to just keeping the extra monster zone and being absolutely annoying. So I do love this card, and it's basically your main monster to just OTK or do some particular things of that nature. And then for the rest of your Link monsters, we have the 1 copy of IP Masquerena, the 1 copy of Crystal Haki Firebreaks, the 1 copy of Gloomy, 1 Unicorn, Wanapalooza, and of course budget access code, which is Boral Sword Dragon. These are the rest of the Link monsters I decided to run. Boral Sword for OTK potential, Palooza because you have the ability to Link climb really fast, so it is an option if you need to. Unicorn with IP most of the time to just, be a disruption during the opponent's turn. Gloomy and Hearty Firebracks mostly to just help you climb during your turn if you're going second into a Boral Sword, or in the case of Hearty Firebracks, maybe even just going into Palooza Bow the Goddess with like 3 interruptions, which is just pretty good in general. And that does it for the Link monsters. Now we'll move on into the rest of the extra deck monsters, which we have 5 additional monsters that are not Links, which the first one of them is Baron de Fleur, which is our Synchro monster, which could be even a level 9 Synchro if you don't want Baron. Baron, in my opinion, is the best one, so you take it in, or should say, you take a Reinhardt and a Vice Frost to make this, which is not really that hard to do as one of your combos. But if you don't really want this, you can take any, like for example, like an Acro plus a Vice Stars Frost, and then you can just like make, for example, a Shen. So that's also an option if you want to. But I do think that the only Synchro monster you kind of need to is something like Baron de Fleur. Then you also have 1 copy of Gossip Bamboozling Gossip Shadow for your rank 3. Because you do have enough level 3s that you can actually use this, get a draw, and also just negate an effect, so that's pretty good. 1 copy of Abyss Dweller to deal with annoying 2 element / sprite effects, I guess, for the most part. 1 Baguska, because you can just also negate all of the monster's effect with your Tri-Heart as well on the field, so that becomes really annoying. And then, of course, the 1 copy of Zeus Sky Thunder to just, slap on top of one of your monsters. Mostly it's going to be Gossip Shadow during a later turn after you attack with it, and then you just even get yourself like 1 board wipe. Zeus is sometimes actually more than enough sometimes to seal games. But that does it for the extra deck and does it for the deck profile as a whole. Hope you enjoyed this one. I am going to show you really basic quick combos with this deck because this combo section of the deck is not really something too complex. But this deck is really simple and really fun. And I do think it's a great deck all around. But like I said, now we'll move on into the very basic combo section because I do want to show you what you're able to do with your cards. So welcome into the combo section. In the combo section, as I mentioned before, I'm going to show you pretty basic combos where it comes to this deck because the combos of this deck are not complex. But if you don't know how to play this deck, it's pretty important to know how to play with it. So for the first combo that we need to have is just open it up with any Scareclaw monster. It doesn't matter each one, and you are able to go into 1 card Tri-Heart with an additional search at the end of it. So that's actually pretty cool. So let's get started. Start things off, we open up with Acro, so we're going to normal summon the Acro. We're going to link it off immediately into our link 1 Lightheart. Lightheart effect, we'll search from our deck to our hand the field spell, and then we're going to activate the field spell, which add to your hand, because we don't have it yet, the 1 copy of Reichardt. Because we control a Scareclaw monster, and this is the same column, we're going to special summon the Reichardt. Since we don't really have enough monsters in defense position, unfortunately we don't get the draw 1, but we are able to get the Arrival, and then we activate the Arrival immediately to summon the Acro right back. In defense position, of course, because that's how the card works. Then we're going to take all 3 of these, and then I'm going to summon the Tri-Heart right out of your extra deck. Basically, 3 effect monsters are making it, and then we're going to use the effect of Tri-Heart to special summon back Acro once more, and use the effect of Tri-Heart to either search another copy of Reichardt to the next turn, or in this particular case I decided to go with a copy of Astra just to have OTK potential for the next turn. So this particular combo is really simple. It's a 1 card going into a Tri-Heart plus particular additional things, so that is very cool. But that does it for the first combo. Now we'll move on into the second one. So for our second combo, like I said, these combos are not really complex, but for this one we're going to open up with 2 Scareclaw names in our hand, and depending on the fact that we open up with 2, we can actually search a different card with the Reinhardt, as you will see. So to start things off, of course, we're going to normal summon the Astra, and then since we control a Scareclaw monster, special summon the Balloon. Then we're going to take the Astra and link it off into our copy of Lightheart, of course, in the extra monster zone. Use the effect of Lightheart, search the field spell, and then going to activate the field spell and search the Reichardt, because we do need the Reichardt in our hand, and it's basically our best monster. Now in this particular case, we have a very, very interesting choice with Reinhardt. We can special summon a Reinhardt and then either search the Arrival, the Eagle Booster, which I forgot its name, or we can search Splash. If we search the Eagle Booster or Splash, we're just basically able to get like a particular interruption or a protection to our Scareclaw monster and set it. If we search the Arrival again, we are able to make a basically a 4 negation Appaloosa. But because we are going to try to stay with the Scareclaw stuff, we are going to search the Splash, set the Splash, and then link all three of these once again into the Tryhard. Tryhard effect will revive the Astra or the Balloon, whatever you want to specifically, and then we're going to use the effect of Tryhard to search for our deck to our hand, the copy of Acro to add to our hand, and then we're going to pass the turn to our opponent. Basically, this time specifically, we end up with an interruption plus the same kind of thing over again. Now, granted, we could have added Arrival and, like I said, go into a 4 negate Appaloosa, but that's technically up to you what you want to do. But that does it for combo number 2. Now we'll move on into the final combo, which is combo number 3. For our third and final combo, again, very simple combo. All you have to open up with is the Scareclaw name and a Parallel Exceed, and you basically have this particular combo on lockdown and essentially working. So to start things off, as usual, we're going to normal summon the Scareclaw name, and we're going to link it immediately into your copy of Lightheart. Lightheart effect will trigger and give you the field spell, which you're going to activate immediately, and since we didn't open up with the Reinhardt, we're going to search it to our hand. You know, monsters in the same column, we're going to special summon the Reinhardt. Reinhardt will search the Revival spell, and then we're going to activate the Revival spell and special summon back the Acro in this particular case. Now we're going to take, once again, all three names, and we're going to special summon out of our extra deck the Tryhard. Since we summon a monster in the extra, or should say a link monster, and it does have link arrows that we can special summon monsters into, unlike the Lightheart, we are able to summon the Parallel Exceed out of our hand, and then summon another copy directly from our deck. Now in this particular case, we have the ability to either make an Abyss Dweller, or a Baguska, depending on our choice. I'm going to make specifically a Baguska, just because it's a lot more funnier. Most of the time to also just have another kind of like negation. But again, you could make the Abyss Dweller, because the Abyss Dweller could be better in some particular matches because it just turned off the graveyard completely. But just because these two works really well in pair with each other, I just decided to go with this. Now we're going to use the effect of Tryhard to revive back the Acro, because it's a level 3 or lower Scareclaw, and then search from our deck to a hand the Astra or any other Scareclaw name, which you want to specifically. But that does it for the combo, and for the combos in general. Like I said, Scareclaw combos are not really that complex, but I still wanted to show some of them, just because maybe some people don't really know how to play with the deck, or just in general want to get the direction because they didn't pick up the support from Power of the Elements and things of that nature. But that's pretty much does it for this. Now we'll move on into the end of the video. Alright, so moving into the next deck choices, basically, I'm going to say this right now, these next deck choices are not going to be the next deck choices, because I am going to do Tri-Brigade Scareclaw first, and then I'm going to go into these choices. So I believe the choices here, the three that we have here, are going to be Blue Eyes, what is it called? I forgot the name of that one. Ida Gnester, and I forgot the third one. These are the three options that we have here on the screen. And then the fourth one that I'm going to give you, 2 weeks for to choose from is going to be, I guess, an update to Lunalights. Tri-Brigade Lunalight, Pure Lunalight, I haven't decided yet, but maybe an update for that in general. And also, I just remember the third option that I gave, which is going to be Zombie World. So, because I really want to play with Scareclaw, and essentially also do the Tri-Brigade version, I'm going to do that one first. And like I said, and then you have the ability to choose from these options, essentially, for which one I'm going to do next. But that pretty much does it for the deck list, and just does it for the video in general. Hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something. And yeah, like I said, this deck is really simple and straightforward, and just really fun to turn your brain off. Essentially, protect the Picasso, try hard, and giving it a lot of effects, and essentially just attacking your opponent and just killing them in the following up turn if you basically go into the OTK variant. So yeah, this deck is really fun and a good time. But that's pretty much it. Hope you would essentially consider subscribing if you enjoyed the video. Give a like, of course, if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments down below, again, if there is anything you would like me to know, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.